Hey everybody, welcome back to When the Lights Go Out podcast. My name is Eli, and this is kind of the start of our second season of podcasts. And depending on how you're consuming this piece of media, you might actually be able to see us. I'm a real person. What? That's crazy. And here with me today,
We're cutting that out.
I'm rolling my eyes.
we're not cutting any of it out. I'm a real person. Who's introduce yourselves, guys. Start with Move.
A move.
Any taglines on that move? Or just kind
Yeah, I mean,
I don't know if you wanted to say anything more
Who is
about
this
yourself.
I am
Brag
who
about,
I,
brag about yourself a little
I am who I am, for better or for worse.
bit.
Are you getting married?
Okay.
Anyways, so today, actually, for the next 4 podcasts, we're doing 4 kind of mini podcasts where we talk about some really interesting historical events and how they kind of overlap with some also sporting events. And we've got 2 guests, 2 very special guests. The first being James. Say hi, James.
Hey guys, I'm James.
And we also have Sean.
Hey, I'm Sean. Follow me on Twitter. Nino Applause.
We'll put your guys' information in the descriptions of all of these. But for those of you who don't know, I know James and Sean from college. We were all in the marching band. Actually, for those of you, some of you may have listened to our sports organization's response to protests podcast. James knows Brandon like very, very well. I mean, Sean and I also know Brandon, but they like go back. So we trust them. But James actually has a minor in history.
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal,
It's a
actually.
pretty big deal.
And Sean is completely unqualified.
You and me both, Sean.
So we kind of brought these guys in to give their perspective on some interesting historical events. Play the intro.
Do, 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 do. I don't know what you want me to do.
When the lights
Is that where we
go
break?
out.
Yeah. I'm gonna-
Well, yeah, we usually put in music.
This is so fun being behind the scenes of a podcast.
I'll essentially silence this entire part and just put music there.
Yeah.
Yeah. We're starting with the Berlin Olympics. Right.
Yeah.
All right. So the first mini podcast we're doing, we're going to talk about the 1936 Berlin Olympics. Woo! So,
Also known as the Hitler Olympics.
those Olympics, yes.
Yeah.
If you don't know who Hitler is, read a book.
Or, just go to history class.
Yeah.
Yeah. Be older than like 5 years old, pretty much anywhere.
Wow, we're gatekeeping our viewers already.
I assume if you're younger than 5, you're not listening to this very specific podcast.
That's an untapped market, actually. that
Yeah.
you can probably get into.
Under
No,
5.
you're right.
Podcast listeners under 5.
We should
I'm gonna write
start
this shit
targeting
down.
our market towards 5.
Under
Hey,
5-year-olds.
you get the right ads going,
Hold up. I'll be back. I need to do some market research.
I gotta make some calls. All right. So why don't we just start with James and kind of go around and say some things we know, like what the historical reference is, and then kind of all the little interesting tidbits that we know about this. So go ahead.
Yeah, sure. So obviously these Olympics were in Berlin. One thing I find interesting is before like the 90s, the Winter Olympics were in the same year. So
Oh, really?
yeah, there was a Winter Olympics earlier in the year, but these were in the summer, obviously,
Mhm.
held in Berlin. And I feel like I can probably give a bit of like a taste of what the world was looking like. And it was pretty bad in 1936. Not great. Like the Great Depression is not even in the US, but it's worse than the rest of the world. Things are not looking great. Hitler came to power in 1933. So he was like declared the dictator. At this point, it's like a one-party state, just
Classic.
Nazi party.
You know,
That's what we look for.
Fascism,
And
good
like
stuff.
he's sort of like on the cusp of making more bold moves. So he won't like invade another country for another few years, but there's already like the Gestapo exists. The Nuremberg laws are in place at this point. There's like a lot of discrimination against the Jews living there. They built one concentration camp at this point as well.
They already built concentration camp?
Yeah, I'm probably not gonna pronounce it right, but Dachau.
I think that's where they had a lot of like the political dissenters and
That makes sense.
like I think a lot of like communists and socialists. Those are one of the first ones to go in.
Yeah, I guess
Yeah.
it makes sense that it was kind of a gradual increase. It wasn't just like flip the switch.
Yeah,
We hate
today
everybody now.
today is definitely the day that makes me realize how things can very slowly and gradually can build up.
For those of you who
That is
don't know,
for
we're
sure.
recording this on January 6th, 2021. Just look
Probably
that day up.
a historic day.
Probably historic, yeah. If this
Absolutely.
isn't in a history book in like 2 years,
It will be. It's
Wouldn't it be wild if in like 2 months this was the day that like Civil War round 2
what the hell? Should we just make our podcast about today?
Uh-oh.
Should we just talk about today's event? There's the Celtics and the Celtics players joined arms in the pre-warm up of the game
with the
today,
Heat? With the Heat, yeah.
and they walked off court and they had like a player meeting about it.
Dang.
Yeah, and
Yeah,
they're
dude,
they're
it's
releasing a statement. So
This is the same shit that happened in sports. At least it's gonna be the same shit that happened over the summer.
yeah.
Yeah. And this is unrelated to today's events, but the Sixers are kicking the Wizards' ass right
It
now.
was like tied when I checked.
Well, the
Damn it.
Sixers are good, so
Don't spoil this for me. If
The
you're from the
Wizards-
future, don't spoil this.
the
for me.
Wizards are not
wow.
good. I'm sorry. Westbrook was doing nothing and will do nothing for your team.
We have been
Washington slander right now.
derailed from what
Bradley Beal has 32 at the half.
Yeah, Bradley Beal
Yeah,
is
that's pretty good.
only player. Yeah, he has 32 points at the half because no one else is
No one-
scoring.
Hey, listen.
Is the
if
score
this-
something to 32? Is that their
Yeah.
It's 87 to 62, I think.
He has
If
half.
this is the or 82 to 60, if this is the day, January 6th is the day that the United States went to hell. I hope it's also the day that Bradley Beal scores 60 points.
Oh yeah.
That's all I'm saying.
Good luck.
Anyways, back to 1936.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think that's definitely a good point. Like it's been a slow rise for the past 3 years in Germany, and you also have to remember, like we're only like 15 years out from the end of World War I, which was supposed to be like the last World War. So there was a lot of plans to like rebuild Germany, which was obviously like pretty devastated from the First World War, and they were given this Olympic bid like 5 years prior. I'm sure in an effort to like bring some prestige to this country that they're trying to like help out, because back in the early 30s, like there was no Hitler really. They were just another country looking for some help in the middle of Europe. I also learned that the 32 Olympics were in Los Angeles, and Hitler like was like, well, we need to do them one better. So he built like a 100,000 seat stadium and was like, let's get things going.
Yeah. And I can give some like sport historical like specifics on like what happened. So Hitler basically used the Olympics for two big things. One was to try and prove that Aryan athletes were superior to any other athlete. And two, and that first point did not go well.
Yeah.
Jesse Owens.
I would like to talk about that.
Jesse Owens
I'd like to talk about
had
Oh,
like
yeah.
a meteoric rise in that Olympics. And the second reason
Meteors
wa-
fall.
Meteorite? Is that what you mean? What's the
Meteorites are. I was just
Big,
being. I was just,
exponential, grand.
I was being an asshole. Keep going.
Move on.
I'm gonna ignore that and keep going like nothing happened.
There are more important things, Eli.
The second reason was to essentially show every other country how powerful Germany was. So Hitler was doing things like James said, building that huge stadium to show everybody what they could do. He was rolling tanks through the streets to show their army's might, and it was a lot of that. And those two major points I mentioned: one, showing that Aryan athletes are better, and two, showing Germany's might were the two biggest reasons, or the biggest things Hitler used those Olympics for.
Right. And you were talking about how that first point really didn't pan out. And you mentioned Jesse Owens. Yeah, I think another important point to bring up was not only was it Jesse Owens, but it was like all 18 of the African Americans who ended up going representing the U.S. They won 14 medals, 8 of them gold, and they won a quarter of the medals by the entire U.S. team, and it was just 18 athletes. And
That's pretty good.
yeah, it's really, really insane. And like I say, kind of a counter, because people like in like the U.S. knew like Hitler was like trying to bring on like this Aryan prominence. There was a lot of debate about whether Black athletes should go to these Olympics. There was talks of like how they'll be treated and if they'll be discriminated against, and it really put these Black athletes in a position where like they're the U.S. is telling them, hey, don't go to Germany because you'll be discriminated against. But meanwhile, like they're living in like the Jim Crow like era, and it's like
Yeah, it's not that much. I mean, it's better, but
yeah, and
by
it
how
really,
much? Yeah, less negative.
And they were also all asked to like speak out against like the discrimination of the Jewish people in Germany, and they were also like, well, this is a little weird, you're telling me to like speak out against the discrimination of the Jews in Germany, but what about at home? Like it became like it like through no power of their own, it became like a very like political complex issue.
That's so interesting. I think like that may be really the beginning of how in the sports world, if you're a Black athlete, like whether or not you want it, you're kind of thrust into a political spotlight, and you're like given some sort of social authority that no other person in any other situation is really given without their own consent. Like I imagine those guys, I mean, maybe they did want to, some of them, maybe, those people, maybe some of them wanted to speak out against some of these things. Maybe some of them really didn't. I don't really know, but like whether or not they wanted to, like they were the Olympics for the country is very different than what it's like for individuals. For individuals, it's very much like the peak of your athletic career. It's the kind of the most important part. It's you train for years from a very young age to get to go to that, and you get to compete with like the world really, and the world is watching you because of how important it is to everyone. So to have that kind of be your mindset, and then someone say, but also they're looking at your skin color and you have to say something about that. It must have sucked, to say the least.
Yeah, and I want to bring up like something slightly unrelated but kind of cool that I just found out. So in 1968, when Tommy Smith and John Carlos raised their fist in the Olympics, Jesse Owens was kind of an ambassador at that point for the International Olympic Committee. The IOC knew some kind of protest was going to happen, so they actually sent Jesse Owens to talk the American players out of some kind of protest.
Wow.
And obviously that didn't work out. But, I mean, like it's just how it shows like you're asking them to be political, but then some players obviously just through whatever reasons don't want to do it. And then sometimes they'll go like the opposite direction and try others from not doing it either.
There was I know there was a movement to boycott the 1936 Olympics, and in the beginning, I know Jesse Owens was on the side of the boycott. But what's really interesting is Germany, the Olympic Committee pledged that the Germans would abide by the Olympic Charter and said, we won't discriminate. That's what I guess, I don't know, virtue signaling or not. That when they put that statement out, a lot of African American newspapers actually started opposing the boycott because they first they said like they criticized like the boycott because like how can you try to like they were like criticizing for being virtue signaling. Oh, we're not going to go to Germany because of discrimination. Yet like we're sitting here, like I mentioned earlier, but also like it would be a great opportunity for like the world to see like how successful Black athletes can be, especially from that earlier point of Hitler trying to show Aryan superiority.
Yeah, it's like I think we sort of take it as a given now that like the winners of the 100, 200, 400 meter runs will be probably African American, or even just like African runners in general.
Yeah.
It's been a
But, like-
stereotype now.
Yeah.
Yeah. And now, but like back then, you're right. That definitely was much different.
And
I also,
go ahead. No,
I was-
go ahead.
I sort of like the U.S. back then. It was like a very different country than we are now. Just in like how we saw ourselves on the national stage. Like just 15 years prior to these Olympics, the U.S. had decided not to join the League of Nations, which is the precursor to the UN. Like still very isolationist. Like Hitler's over there doing stuff that everyone knew was bad, and we were like, well, not our problem. So
Yeah.
it definitely was like a different place.
That is super interesting. That at the time, maybe that in some ways was like kind of informed some of the decisions too for some of those athletes to want to go, and for some of the other people, whether they're whatever race, to want them not to go, because they just don't want to be involved. And I also think it's super interesting that kind of what we were talking about earlier, how Black athletes, especially at that time, were given a choice whether or not they wanted it, and they had to make a choice. So doing nothing is also a stance.
Mhm.
Yeah.
It's like Michael Jordan not taking a side during the North Carolina Senate elections
Yeah.
Exactly.
or Congress. I don't know.
Something like
It was
that. Yeah.
it was either a Senate or a congressional.
Yep. Eli, I think it's a really good point about like this could be one of the earliest positions where Black athletes are forced to be like more than athletes.
Mhm.
This is a huge on the world stage. So I mean, we might think it might have resulted in just in the last 10 to 15 years, but it's going on for 80, 90 years.
Yeah, I mean, you can see this is probably the first point where at the scale that we can see it historically, it's really happened. And I definitely think it sets a precedent because, I mean, as you'll see, if you just look at the history of sports or history in general, like, I mean, you'll go to like the Jackie Robinsons, you'll go to, the Muhammad Ali's, and then you'll keep going, and eventually you'll get to the past. Like, I mean, for us, like the past 4 years has been very, very well. Even the past 8-10 years has been very much in your face about it. Yeah, it's so interesting that how though it's kind of a similar pattern, and it feels like it's been ramping up for a while, but it's crazy that it started there, and I didn't realize how impactful that has probably been on a lot of people.
In fact, one of the athletes was Jackie Robinson's older brother.
Oh,
Wow.
And another one was a future Congress rep. Yeah, I was
Nice.
reading up about how like the 18, they were called like, they have a term for them. One of the newspapers came up with a cool little something like
18
Oh, I love when they do
people-
that.
it's something about eagles. I don't know, but yeah, there's just lives just very interesting, and like how they weren't recognized by the U.S. or by Roosevelt when they came back. And when there's that quote by Jesse Owens, like after I came home, it was like really apparent that people were gonna like shake my hand and slap me on the back, but no one's gonna give me a job.
Dang.
And it only took hold on, I can do math. 70, 90 years, 2016, when the White House finally recognized.
Really, 90 years.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like one thing if you go to Germany and you win all these medals, and everybody knew Hitler wasn't going to shake a black
Yeah.
athlete. That's one thing. But then if you like come back and
Yeah.
you're not getting the due you deserve.
And they were in integrated, like the Olympic Village where all the athletes live. They were integrated. They
Yeah.
weren't segregated. So they like gotta
That's
like
funny.
they gotta like
They got a taste of it.
they got a taste
Yeah.
of like what it means to not be like a considered a second class citizen.
Yeah.
Like, and then they have to come home and then like be like, wow, like, and it's just
Yeah.
it's like it must like I don't know how you reconcile with the fact that like you have like such a big conflict and everyone's like saying yeah like discrimination against like Jewish people sucks, and then you go home and they're like, so that sucks. What about us?
Yeah.
I mean, at this point, they're still 20 years out from desegregating schools. Like, it's not even really close at this point.
Yeah, it's.
I mean, and that's really like step one.
Yeah. And I'm sort of
Still not
surprised.
quite there.
I was sort of surprised to see how FDR reacted, because like the 30s, when like Black Americans started to move from the Republican Party to the Democratic Party, and it's still was like he's using them to make like massive electoral gains. Like the 1932 and 36 elections were huge blowouts, like with supermajorities in both houses, but still like publicly they're not getting much.
Yeah, and Jesse Owens, like I remember he like said that like where he's like, Hitler didn't snub me. It was our president who snubbed me.
Yeah.
The president didn't even send a telegram. Like, yeah,
Dang.
Yeah.
With the heat.
So,
Not even a
So-
telegram.
so like
Not even a text, bro.
pulling it away from, the American hypocrisy and back
Yeah.
to like
Yeah.
the 1936 Olympics. Like, so I think we're gonna find this in every single one of these mini series podcasts we're gonna do is that there's two types of power in the world, right? Like there's hard power, which is like the size of your army, how much damage you can do, like all that. And then there's soft power, which is like your political connections, how you can do deals around the world, and the
Your
36
influence.
your influence essentially.
Mhm.
Yeah. So the 36 Olympics was just like Hitler flexing his soft power. Like, I have this huge army. I can build a gigantic stadium. I'm better than America because I've integrated communities. Like all of this stuff, it was just to show that his like soft power, his influence in the country, and ultimately like he had other countries on his side during the war. So
Yeah.
I think it's a really interesting snapshot. Like you sort of get this, like Germany gets put under a microscope, like right in the middle of Hitler's rise to power. Like he's a dictator in 33, and by 39 they're invading other countries. So like
Right.
you're literally right in the middle, and the whole world looked, and everyone was like, nice, that nothing to see here. keep going
Give me
about
my
what
gold
you're
medal,
doing.
and I'll see you later, I guess.
And yeah, he flexed his muscle, and either people were like, that's impressive, let's let him do. Yeah.
what's
So
next on the story for young Hitler?
I wonder what this man he did something. I wonder what he's gonna do next.
Find out on the next episode of Dragon Balls.
More like the next 70 episodes, really. Like that's a Dragon Ball Z joke and also a World War II joke.
Congrats, Eli.
Yeah,
Proud of
a twofer. A
twofer.
You know what,
Okay.
Eli? You can't see it because it's below camera, but I'm gonna give you a knee slap for that.
Thank you.
It's one knee slap.
So this was a really interesting kind of look at a very specific slice of history. I mean, the Olympics doesn't last very long, but the kind of buildup and the ramifications in both the political and the sports aspect, they actually kind of flow like in parallel, which I think as you'll listen to the rest of the miniseries, you'll kind of see that that's a similar trend. But it's just so interesting to see how interwoven those two are, and I mean how similar some of the issues at that point are at different points in time, and some of them still now. It's so, and again in both the sports and the political historical side of it. So thanks for listening. This was just episode 1 of this kind of mini series where we go through all of these historical events and how the sports world interacts with them. Next up is India versus Pakistan in cricket. So stay tuned. I'm Eli.
I'm Moof.
I'm Sean.
I'm James.
This is when the
Squad
lights
up.
go out.
This is when the lights go out. See you guys next time.
That was cute.